What if you could never experience your own death? Not because you are immortal, but because your consciousness is never present at the moment when everything ends. Imagine that. Every time your life could have ended, reality simply split, and you continued to exist in another version of it. This is not a science fiction idea. It is one of the most disturbing implications of a real interpretation of quantum mechanics. But here's the dark truth. If something always survives, perhaps it is not the you believe yourself to be. In this video, you will question not only what happens after death, but also who or what truly continues to exist. Most of us move through life with an unshakable confidence in the solidity of what we call today to human perception. Reality manifests as a straight line, a single continuous track where the past is carved in stone and the future is a road yet to be traveled. This linear vision allows us to plan, remember, and above all, to feel that we are the same individuals who woke up this morning. However, this stability is merely a sensory construction, a simplified interface that our brain projects so that we can survive without being overwhelmed by the complexity of the cosmos. What we call the objective world is, in fact, a narrow filter, a lens that deliberately ignores the chaotic and multifaceted nature of the fabric of existence. We believe in a single reality, not because it is the only fact, but because our senses evolved to ignore the infinite versions of now pulsing just beneath the surface of our everyday consciousness. When we descend to the level of fundamental particles, the illusion of a solid and unique reality begins to disintegrate into a sea of unsettling probabilities. In the quantum domain, objects do not behave like predictable billiard balls. They exist in a state of superposition, which means they can be in multiple places and states simultaneously. It is a concept that challenges all the logic we have accumulated over decades of experience. A particle does not choose a path until it is forced to do so, remaining in a cloud of possibilities where all versions of history are equally real. This behavior suggests that the foundation of our universe is not made of concrete facts, but of a mathematics of uncertainty is replaced by the If the matter that composes your body and your brain obeys these laws, an inevitable question arises: why do we experience only one outcome if nature, at its most basic level, insists on keeping all doors open at the same time? For decades, science has attempted to explain why infinite quantum possibilities appear to collapse into a single event at the moment we observe them, the so-called measurement problem. The classical interpretation suggests that the act of observation forces nature to make a decision. But in 1957, Hugh Everett III proposed something far more disturbing. What if nature never chooses? In the many-worlds interpretation, the collapse is an illusion of the observer. When we perform a measurement or make a decision, the universe does not discard the other options. It simply branches. If you are faced with a choice, reality divides into two versions of you, each living a different outcome in distinct branches of existence. For Everett, decoherence is the silent process that isolates these branches, causing each version of you to feel unique and absolute, completely unaware that in a parallel universe, an identical version of you is living the consequence of the choice you abandoned. If we accept that reality constantly branches with every quantum interaction, the notion of a singular self becomes one of the greatest illusions in human history. Imagine the immensity of versions of yourself that may exist at this very moment. In some branches, you made decisions that led to glory. In others, to bitter regret. And in a vast majority, small, insignificant details changed the course of entire afternoons. This perspective transforms the stability of our reality into something terribly fragile, like a single frame of film that we believe to be the entire movie. The existential reflection that emerges from this scenario is profound. If there are trillions of versions of ourselves, which one possesses the true essence? Or are we merely an informational pattern distributed across an infinite multiverse, living the illusion of being the protagonist of a unique story? This is the terrain where science meets mystery, setting the stage for the most frightening question of all. If reality divides to accommodate all possibilities, what happens when one of those possibilities is the end of your own life? Human consciousness possesses a singular and rarely discussed characteristic. It is, by definition, incapable of witnessing its own absence. For you, the world only exists because there is an observer present to interpret it. The moment the light of perception is extinguished, the entire universe, with all its stars and galaxies, ceases to be a subjective experience. Therefore, From your internal point of view, death is an event that can never be experienced. You may witness the end of others, observe the fragility of life around you, and feel the weight of grief, but your own cessation is a horizon that retreats infinitely as you approach it. It is like trying to observe darkness by turning on a flashlight. The very act of being there to observe death prevents it from being the end of your experience. From this perspective, consciousness is a flow that refuses to encounter its own termination, creating an existential isolation where you are, paradoxically, condemned to exist forever within your own timeline. To illustrate this disturbing mechanism, physicists and philosophers proposed a thought experiment known as quantum suicide. Imagine a device connected to a radioactive atom. If the atom decays, a gun fires, instantly ending your life from the perspective of the many worlds interpretation. Every time the device is triggered, reality splits into two, one in which the gun fires and another in which it fails. In the version where the gun fires, consciousness is interrupted and ceases to exist as an observer. However, in the version where it fails, you remain conscious, hearing only the dry metallic click of the trigger. According to the theory, because you can only inhabit the branch where an operating consciousness exists to process the experience, you will invariably find yourself in the version where you survived. Repeat the process 1,000 times, and you will continue to hear the click, becoming the improbable survivor of an impossible statistic. While for all external observers, in almost every other reality, you have long since departed. Many people report experiences that defy logic. The car accident where the metal twisted fatally, yet you emerged without a scratch, or the fall that should have been the end but resulted in an inexplicably safe landing. We often call this luck or a miracle, but quantum immortality suggests a far more technical and unsettling explanation. Perhaps you've died in trillions of other realities at that exact second, but your consciousness, incapable of ceasing, was dragged into the only exceedingly thin branch where survival was physically possible. These microstories of near death are echoes of a consciousness that refuses to collapse, leaping between tracks of reality to ensure its continuity. The sense of strangeness that often follows such events is the intuition that your presence here is an anomaly, a statistical deviation that sustains the illusion of a linear life while your tree of possibilities is filled with severed branches. This concept completely inverts our traditional understanding of mortality. If the opposite of death is not life, but the uninterrupted continuity of experience, then we are prisoners of a journey that never ends. Quantum immortality is not a promise of eternal youth or a spiritual paradise. It is a mechanical law dictating that perception must continue somewhere, regardless of how improbable or degraded that survival may be. Subjectively, you will never reach the final point of the story. You'll always find a gap, a microscopic branch where the heart still beats and the eyes still see. The real danger is not the end of consciousness, but the fact that it may be pushed into increasingly narrow and marginal realities where survival is guaranteed. But vitality has disappeared. If consciousness always finds a path, the question we must ask is not what happens after death, but who this self is that is being forced to continue at any cost. And if consciousness continues to leap into the branches where it survives, who or what truly remains on the other side? Is the you who began the journey the same one who inhabits these increasingly improbable branches? We perceive ourselves as fixed entities, as if they were a solid self traveling through time. But the truth is that identity is a narrative construction, a story the brain tells itself to make sense of the flow of experiences. This sense of continuity is sustained almost entirely by memory and psychological coherence. We believe we are the same person who lived through childhood or youth simply because we carry fragments of records from those periods. But if we remove the layers of memories, what remains? Identity functions like a flame. It appears to have a constant form, but the matter that sustains it is in constant combustion and change. In the context of quantum immortality, this fragility is pushed to its limit, because if reality divides, yourself also divides. What survives in one branch of reality may not be what survives in another, and the line connecting these versions is as thin as a thread of thought in an ocean of possibilities. Instead of an immutable substance, modern science and philosophy suggest that identity is a dynamic pattern of information similar to a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool maintains its shape, but the water passing through it is new every second. If quantum immortality is real, this pattern is constantly bifurcating and distorting. Imagine that every second Trillions of versions of you inherit your past but begin to follow divergent futures. Over time, these versions accumulate traumas, lessons, and memories so distinct that the connection between them becomes purely causal but no longer personal. Biological continuity may persist, but the continuity of the soul, that essence you feel to be the pilot of your life, begins to fragment. You cease to be a single line and become a tree whose most distant branches no longer recognize themselves as part of the same trunk. To understand how identity can die while the body lives, we need only look at cases such as that of Phineas Gage, the 19th century worker whose brain was pierced by an iron rod. Gage survived physically, but the person he was educated, responsible, and kind disappeared instantly, replaced by an aggressive and unrecognizable man. If a physical alteration can assassinate a personality without interrupting the heartbeat, what happens in the branches of quantum immortality where the survivor suffers neurological damage or profound trauma? Consciousness may continue to inhabit a body that no longer houses the original character. In these cases, quantum immortality reveals its most unsettling face. It does not preserve you, it preserves only observation. The you that you love and protect may be merely a temporary passenger in a biological vehicle that will continue to exist long after the original driver has been lost in the fog of mental fragmentation. Faced with this disintegration of personal identity, spiritual traditions such as Vedanta offer a perspective that resonates strangely with modern physics. Perhaps what survives is not the biographical self, but the witness consciousness. In this view, you are not the sum of your memories or your name, but the empty space in which experiences occur. If quantum immortality ensures that experience never ends, it may be referring to this silent and impersonal observer rather than to the person you see in the mirror. The reflection that remains is devastating for the ego. Immortality may preserve the light of perception, but at the cost of everything you consider sacred about your individuality. Ultimately, quantum immortality is not about you living forever. It is about the act of observing refusing to cease, even when the original observer has become a shadow or a stranger to itself. If immortality does not guarantee the preservation of who we are, but only the continuity of existence, what price do we pay for never being able to depart? We now enter the darkest truth of all, the difference between existing and being alive. There is a fundamental distinction that we often ignore in our desperate search for permanence. The difference between the mere continuity of consciousness and the fullness of being alive. Quantum immortality, in its mechanical and indifferent nature, does not distinguish between a vibrant life and a merely persistent existence. It only guarantees that the light of perception does not go out. Imagine inhabiting a branch of reality where your body has failed, but technology or a biological anomaly keeps your consciousness trapped in a state of minimal perception, incapable of interacting, yet also incapable of departing. On these statistical margins of the multiverse's existence becomes background noise, an echo of consciousness without the support of vitality. Living requires movement, exchange, and renewal. Quantum immortality offers only the static presence of an observer who cannot close their eyes, transforming the gift of life into an eternal and silent inertia. One of the cruelest implications of this theory is the absolute existential isolation it imposes. While your consciousness is dragged into increasingly improbable branches to avoid its own end, the people you love, your children, friends, and partners continue to follow the natural flow of mortality in the branches where you've passed away. In your subjective world, you survive, but with each quantum leap to avoid death. You drift further away from the shared reality with those you once knew. You become a castaway on an island of improbability, surrounded by versions of people who may not be the same ones you loved. Or worse, watching the world age and disappear while you remain trapped in a solitary continuity. Quantum immortality is not a shared journey. It is a trajectory of a point of view that becomes increasingly singular, until no one remains who shares the same origin or the same history. Medical science shows us cases of minimal consciousness states or locked-in syndrome, where the mind remains awake within a body that no longer responds. In quantum immortality, these states are not merely statistical tragedies, but possible destinations for a consciousness that refuses to collapse. If the theory dictates that you must continue in any branch where survival is minimally possible, this includes realities of prolonged suffering or severe neurological degradation. Humanity's historical pursuit of immortality has always been based on the desire to preserve vigor and joy, but quantum mechanics possesses no moral or aesthetic compass. It preserves the observer, even if the observed scenario is one of ruin. The fear of death is thus replaced by a far deeper fear, that of a consciousness that survives its own dignity, trapped in a cycle of perception that offers neither exit nor rest. As we reach the limit of this reflection, we realize that death, far from being an enemy, may be the necessary horizon that gives shape and value to the human experience. It is the awareness that time is a limited resource that makes love urgent, courage real, and beauty precious. If we were immortal by decree of physics, our choices would lose their weight, for there would always be another branch to try again, and another, until meaning dissolved into an ocean of infinite chances. The dark truth is that quantum immortality places upon us the weight of eternity without giving us the structure to bear it. It is finitude that allows us to be whole. Without an end, life is not a work of art, but a sentence that never ends, losing its grammar and its meaning. Accepting the possibility of departure is, perhaps, the ultimate act of rebellion against the prison of continuous existence, a search for the peace that purely mechanical immortality can never offer. And if quantum immortality is a prison of perception, and identity is an illusion of memory, what remains of us? In the silence between atoms and beyond the branches, who is the true master of this journey? Quantum immortality, in all its disturbing complexity, functions as an unforgiving mirror, reflecting not what we are, but the profound uncertainties we carry about the self. It forces us to confront the fact that scientific explanations, however precise they may be in describing the behavior of atoms, remain strangely silent about the nature of the consciousness that observes them. We are trapped in a labyrinth of branches, trying to find meaning for our permanence. While physics suggests that we are merely a persistent pattern in an ocean of infinite probabilities, yet it is precisely in this collapse of certainties that something new begins to emerge. Perhaps the true lesson of this theory is not about living forever in a body or in a memory, but about realizing that our deepest essence is not in the branches of the tree that divides, but in the root that remains still. If identity is fragile and survival is mechanical, perhaps what we truly are is the witness consciousness, the silent observer that is not born with the body and therefore cannot be destroyed by any quantum event. From this perspective, the branches of reality are merely the scenes of an infinite film, while you are the white screen upon which the light is projected. At the end of this journey, I leave you with a question that transcends Everett's equations and Baudrillard's anxieties. If everything you consider to be you can be divided, altered, or forgotten, what remains? What within you is so fundamental that it has never been touched by time, pain, or the choices you have made? There is something within you that was never born and, therefore, can never die. Real immortality may not be the continuity of a story, but the recognition that you are the author, not merely the character who fears the end of the book. Thank you for walking with me to the limits of reality. If this content awakened in you a new level of perception, I invite you to subscribe and continue exploring the mysteries of consciousness in our upcoming videos. Remember, awakening begins the moment you stop fearing the illusion and start observing who is truly looking. Until next time, in the infinity of your own consciousness.